Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I'm joined by David Lapin, founder of Lapin International. David is a global thought leader on the topics of leadership, culture, and business transformation, and he's the author of Lead by Greatness. Raised in apartheid-era South Africa, he helped draft one of the world's first formal corporate ethics codes. As the founder of Lapin International, David advises executives worldwide on aligning strategy with character and culture with purpose. He lives in Israel and travels frequently to the United States for client engagements. This was a really fun conversation for me. In addition to David's corporate life, he is also a longtime practicing rabbi. And what we talk about in this conversation is the blend of spirituality and business, and not religion in business necessarily. We do talk a little bit about what Judaism can teach about business, but this isn't about Judaism. It isn't about any organized religion. It is about humanity and how we can infuse business with more humanity. And I think whatever religion you are, or if you're not religious at all, you can still get a lot out of this conversation and what it means to be a human being and how we can be better human beings in our personal lives and at work. And as David shares at the end, when we talk about the outcomes of this work from a dollars and cents standpoint, you'll see that becoming a better human actually leads to some better financial outcomes. So I really enjoyed this. This was a very grounding and meaningful conversation for me. I hope it has the same impact on you. Here is David Lapin. David, welcome to the show. Excited to have you on today. And really in particular, really interested to pair the two sides of your world. I think it's so fascinating when we talked originally, but would love, before I say anything and introduce you, would love for you to just introduce your origin story and the two worlds that you operate in.
Thanks, O'Brien. Thanks for having me on your show. I've too been looking forward to this conversation. So my own background is, you're right, the kind of two worlds, and it's the integration of those two worlds, which has really been the story of my life. I come from a rabbinic family, so I've been involved in the spiritual world. My father was an important rabbi, both in South Africa and later on in California. My great uncle and descendants. But I also have family. My uncle was in business, and my grandfather was a businessman. So there have been these two parts to my life. And I realized quite early on that any of the spiritual messages that I want to share with the world should be shared in the business forum rather than in synagogue or in churches or mosques where people are already committed, where the challenges of living an ethical life and living an integrous life and living a life of faith, the challenges are in the business world, not in the religious institutions which are designed to support religious life. Business life is, if anything, designed to undermine a life of faith and ethics. So being able to have the tools to be able to live uprightly in a business environment, I realized was something far more important to spend my time and effort in. And that's where I focus my attention from very early on.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there, but starting on the religious side, because it sounds like growing up in your family, that's where things started. You have a grandfather who was a rabbi, your father was a rabbi, you said. What about that work that you saw them doing drew you to want to follow in their footsteps?
Brian, I think it was the impact they had on people. So just seeing people develop and grow in front of them, it's almost like you might be inspired to be a gardener or a farmer if you watched somebody actually planting crops and nurturing plants and flowers and just watching beauty grow up around them. And I was able to see that even in childhood, to be able to see how people were impacted and how people's lives were changed by what they were doing. So to me, that became kind of a no-brainer that if I had the talent and the ability to inspire people, that's something I could and should be doing. As well as the vast body of knowledge, the Jewish religion, it just has is privileged to have access to vast bodies of knowledge, both in terms of quantity and in depth. And having access to that and being able to apply that and to bring that to the world in a way that adds value, to me was really interesting. Particularly in the business world, my thesis, which really comes from a Jewish religious perspective, is that one can convert quality into quantity and vice versa. So by improving the quality of our businesses, not just in terms of what they do and how they do it, but more from the people who are doing it, actually working on the quality. I always believed that better people can do better business, that better people have greater impact, and that if we could develop a way to understand what does that mean, what is a better person, and how does one become a better person, we might have a method of being able to drive growth in business at relatively low cost, because becoming a better person doesn't necessarily cost very much. And that's really the thesis that I started exploring in the beginning of this venture.
You keep teasing out these things that I want to talk about, but I want to stay grounded here for a second. And I will admit that I don't know that much about rabbis. And so outside of leading a sermon at a synagogue, you said you saw your father and your grandfather having this impact on people. What is the role of a rabbi outside of a temple, and what does that work look like with the direct community?
It's a really important question that you're asking, because in the Jewish religion, Judaism is not an institutionalized religion to the degree that it is in other religions, particularly in Christianity and Islam. So, for example, traditionally, the synagogues were relatively small, because on the Sabbath, you can't travel in a car. So your synagogue had to be near to where you lived. So they're relatively small and localized. And the role of the rabbi is not an institutionalized cleric. Rabbi really means teacher. And it also comes from the Hebrew word, which means great, developing greatness, becoming greater, dealing in the area of human greatness is really what a rabbi does. So developing people is the most important part of a rabbi's job. Whether he develops them partially through his sermons on a Saturday in the synagogue, through classes, or in one-on-one coaching, helping them through moments in their lives where there are crises and challenges. There are various different platforms through which a rabbi can inspire people. But his job is to grow people. That's really, if one were to say in one phrase, what is a rabbi's role, a job? It's to grow people. Everything else is just the vehicle he uses.
I like that. I think it's also a great way to just think about your role as a human being.
Yeah, totally.
Help others grow. So you get into that part of your life, your religious practice. You knew you wanted to get into business. What businesses were your father and grandfather in?
So my father wasn't. He was a full-time rabbi. My grandfather was in the wool trade in the early days in South Africa. That was early 20th century when they came to South Africa from Lithuania. So he was at first in the ostrich feather trade, and then ostrich feathers lost their luster and they went into the wool business, which he was in. My grandfather on my mother's side was a farmer. So they were both involved in commercial enterprises. My great uncle was one of the greatest spiritual influences in the Jewish world until he died in the 1980s. And I had the opportunity to study with him. But my father was a full-time rabbi.
And so what was your entree then into the business world? How did you dip your toe in that community?
That's an interesting story. I decided early on that I didn't want to earn my living as a rabbi, although that's what I was qualified. I had no other qualification. I wanted to teach and I wanted to be active as a rabbi, but not earn my living that way, primarily because I didn't want to be restricted in what I said. I didn't want my teaching to be influenced by my need to earn a living and to have to say what is popular and to have to teach what is popular. That intellectual independence was something I protected very fiercely in my entire life until today. That's that freedom to be able to say things as they are and as I believe they are. And I realized to do that, I would have to have a separate source of income. And then I just had an opportunity through connections to join an international trading company where I learned the fundamentals. So we were dealing with commodity trading at that time. I rose to the level of head of the metals and minerals department of this international trading company. And in those days, commodity trading didn't mean sitting in front of a computer. It meant getting into a plane, meeting people in different countries around the world, buying large quantities of commodities, shipping them, selling them. So there was a lot of personal involvement with humans, with people, a lot of negotiation, a lot of research, and we didn't have the internet at that time to do that kind of research. So it was real hands-on business experience that I was taught by this wonderful family who headed this international commodity trading company. And that was where I started off in business and learned most of what I did. as well as learning about the cultures of the world. Because during that period, I was doing business in about 20 different countries around the world, and really began to learn how different the cultures were and how each culture has an ethic. And I started looking at how the cultural ethic impacts the way they do business and the results they were getting. So that led me into the current business, which is really that merging of human values with quantitative business outcomes.
So I'm curious, you mentioned the cultural perspectives and shaping you. How did that expanded cultural perspective shape your work as a rabbi?
Just really understanding how different people are from one another. So yes, traveling around the world, you understand how different a person in Thailand is from a person in Brazil, how different a Japanese person is from a person in France. You really get to understand that. But then you realize also that they're all human beings. There are certain things that they have in common, and that strange paradox between our commonality and our differences is what started intriguing me. That you and I, although we've never met personally and we haven't known each other for long at all, we probably have a whole lot in common. As we explore more and more, we would find the things we have in common, but we also have things that are really different in terms of our backgrounds and life experiences. And how that works, how you optimize and leverage the commonality and understand the complexity of the difference is what I realized was key. So that if I'm sitting with a business partner in Thailand, realizing there is a certain basic humanity at the level of which we can connect as two human beings, but we have very different lenses through which we see and experience the world, and to be able to learn to respect that and understand that. One of my earliest business experiences was with I would use the word because that's the word that he used, a fanatical Muslim business person in Iran. This was before the time that Iran changed the way it operates. It was in the time of the Shah, but we did business in Iran. And I remember the relationship of many years that I built with this person who comes from a religious perspective, such a different background, from a cultural perspective, such a different background. And we were able to deeply respect each other's differences and leverage the sameness of the things we were both interested in, and built not only a long business relationship, but a close friendship as well.
How did you do that? How did you move through some of those differences to connection?
Brian, in that particular case, it was quite interesting because I was advised by my local officer there to remove any external signs of my Jewishness so that this person wouldn't be offended. And I refused to do that. I just said, if he's offended by who I am, we'll never do business. I'm not going to hide who I am because that just wouldn't be authentic. And so I didn't. And it was that he respected most. The fact that I was proud of who I am and yet fully respectful of who he is. And I think that's the key to relationships, isn't it? Even in family relationships and partnerships and marriage, just to understand and have an amazing amount of respect for who the other is and an amazing amount of pride in who we are, and to be able to manage that polarity of who I am and who you are, pride in who I am and respect for who you are.
And to be able to lead with that grace too. I remember listening to an interview with Gabby Reese, who is a U.S. Olympic volleyball player, very successful volleyball player. And she was talking about how one of her mottos in life is go first. And how if you're walking down the street and somebody's coming at you with a straight face, if you just smile genuinely and say good morning, 9 times out of 10, they will light up with a big smile. They will match your smile and say good morning back to you. And just, she shared a number of ways in which going first, leading with how you want those other people to treat you, again, back to the golden rule, right? And what I hear you saying is, I like your combination of, I'm going to be proud of who I am and I'm going to allow you to be proud of who you are. But it sounded like you also went first in acknowledging that for this person, which allowed him to then reciprocate it. Is that a fair assessment?
Certainly. And that's such an important point. And we teach that a lot, that human relationship, well, getting things done, leadership is about an energy. You lead with an energy. You don't lead with doing, you lead with being. And it's who you are that really drives that energy. What I pick up from you is your energy. you're using words to convey your energy. You're using facial expression to convey your energy. But really what is connecting with me and what is inspiring me is the energy I pick up from you. And if I put out a creative, optimistic, loving energy, people respond to that energy. We always respond to the energy around us. It's very hard to counter the energy. If you're in a downward energy, if everything's depressed around you, I don't know about you, but I'm very influenced by environment, by the lighting in a room, by the colors around me. And it's quite hard to overcome them. We can, of course, we can overcome them, but it takes effort and energy. It's much easier just to respond to what's around you. So as a leader, we have to create around the people we're leading the kind of environment that they need to respond or that they can respond to without having to resist and oppose.
Yeah. No, I remember reading, I don't know if I read the book or an article or something, but talking about how energy is contagious and mood is contagious. And you can walk into a room and get sucked into it, or you can walk into a room and try to be the contagion and put off your own energy.
Yes, totally.
So I asked you about how the business work with different cultures influenced your rabbinic work. How did being a rabbi influence the business dealings in that business? Because I would imagine that commodities trading at that time could be considered cutthroat in many ways. I imagine there were opportunities to take advantage of other people. How did your work as a rabbi and with your faith influence how you went about building your business?
So, Brian, I think it was a combination of two things. I think you're absolutely right. There was the energy from my faith and rabbinic background, and also my training in this particular trading company that I worked for. And the owners and the CEO were just incredibly integrous human beings. And one of the things I remember so powerfully was a deal I lost. It was a no-brainer deal. You couldn't lose that deal. They sent me to do the deal. I was very young at the time, and they sent me to do the deal because it was such a no-brainer that even I could pull it off. It was something one couldn't mess up, but I messed it up. And the way I messed it up was because I refused to get involved in bribery. This was in a part of the world where bribery was part of the way you did business at that time. And I just felt that we had the right product at the right price. And apart from the ethics of bribery, I felt there was no need for it. And so I simply refused, and they decided to teach me a lesson that that's not how you do business in that part of the world. And when I came back, I was expecting to be fired because this was an enormous deal that I lost for them. And instead, the CEO came into my office. He didn't even wait for me to come to him. He came into my office to congratulate me and thank me for losing business that we shouldn't have gotten, and for standing up for what's right and for what their values are and what they stand for as a family. And that was where I started to learn that one could do business that way. That yes, their business is often cutthroat, but even in the cutthroat environments in which business operates, an individual that stands authentically for what they believe in will develop respect. That doesn't mean you get every deal. That was part of the lesson. No, you sometimes lose the deals.
Yeah.
It's okay. It didn't impact the total business. We carried on to get other deals. And to learn that the deal you're busy on is not the only deal in the world. And if you lose it for good reasons, that's as valuable as gaining it for bad reasons, or much more valuable.
How do you help people learn that, though? Because that's money not in your pocket. And hey, I want that new car now, or you're trying to buy a new house, or there's all kinds of real pressures in the world. Maybe we are struggling. Maybe we're worried that our boss will fire us if we come back without that deal having blown it. That's how business is done. Couldn't you just do it that way? Like, how do we deal with those negative repercussions, knowing or believing that it will ultimately lead to good? Like, how do you reconcile those two, or how do you help people reconcile those two when maybe it doesn't appear that way in the short term?
So one of the things I try to clarify from the outset is that honesty is not the best policy. Dishonesty is a far better policy, and it's tax-free. So why be honest if dishonesty is a better policy? So the reason we're honest is not because it's the best policy. The reason we're honest is for some other reason, and people need to confront that question. Why are you honest? It's not because honesty pays. Honesty doesn't pay. Very often, honesty does not pay. That's not the reason to be honest. The reason to be honest is because business is so much more, not just business, life is so much more about who you are than what you do. There are lots of people who have done amazing things, but they're just not amazing people. And you've got to make a choice as to, if you had to choose, would you rather be known for the person you are or for the things you did? Of course, we would like both. And mostly we get both. Maybe the things we do are not as much as we would have wanted them to be, as grand as we would have wanted to as ambitious young people. But still, we all achieve things, and we're known for the things we've achieved. But we're also known for who we are. And we need to face that question early on and consistently through our lives. Do I want to be known for who I am, or do I want to be known for what I've accomplished? And the second principle that I teach is, and this does come from my religious background, is you can only control the inputs of business or of life. You cannot control the outcomes. There are too many vectors that influence outcomes. And we should have learned this as humanity. We should have learned this from COVID.
There have been millennia of opportunities to learn this lesson.
Exactly. But even just with COVID in our time, with all that scientific data and knowledge, we couldn't figure it out. We didn't know it was coming. We didn't know how to fix it. We didn't know when it was ending. We didn't know how to end it. We knew nothing. And to understand that we can't control outcomes, we can only control inputs. I can make sure that I'm doing the right things, both from a tactical business perspective, as best as I'm able to, and from an ethical and moral perspective. Where that comes out, I don't know. And again, here, if I move into the faith perspective and say, I believe there's a bigger force that drives outcome than me, why limit that force to outcomes that I can predict? Maybe the outcomes could be even bigger than I can predict. Why limit it? I've learned, and I try to teach, focus on the inputs and allow some freedom for the outcomes to evolve of their own accord, and participate in them and celebrate them and guide them. But don't try to control outcomes. You can't.
Yeah, it's so true, and has been my experience. I'm in a fairly, what I would call, high pressure sales job, and you can do all the right things and lose. We were told the other day that we were by far the better solution, but somebody came in and totally bought the business, and they were like, we're worried about the price, not getting the services we need, but we have to at least try. And I was like, oh, so you're telling us we're better. You're telling us you get what you pay for, and you're still going to make the choice. We can't control the outcome.
Exactly.
We can only control what we do. But it is hard when you are out in the world trying to do things. You're going to fail so many times, and it is hard to reconcile those two sometimes.
It is, O'Brien, and here I have an advantage over you because, judging from your appearance, I'm older than you.
A year or two.
And as one gets older, more and more of how that actually works. As a young person, it's much harder because you're invested everything in this particular deal or what you're doing. You put so much into it, and there's such disappointment when it doesn't work out. And when you look in the rearview mirror years later and you realize that had that worked out, you actually wouldn't have been able to do something else that was more important. Very often those situations, I'm sure you've already experienced that in your life. And you just learn as you get older that the way things turn out is actually the best, although we don't always see it at the time.
Yeah. That's the old story of the Chinese farmer who has a strapping son, and everyone says, oh, you're so lucky you have your son to help you out. And then his son winds up falling under the cow and getting his arm broken. And they say, oh, how unlucky that is. And then a war starts, and all the young men get drafted, but his son had a broken arm, so he can't go. And it's, oh, how lucky are you? And his answer at each turn is, we'll see. Oh, you're so lucky. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, you're so unlucky. Yeah, we'll see. It's like, you just never know what the repercussions are going to be, what that ripple effect is going to be from anything that's happening. If you've lived any period of time, you have some of those stories, but yeah, they definitely add up over time. I really wanted to go to the University of Virginia for school and had applied and got rejected, and actually drove down overnight with my dad and sat in the admissions officer's office and tried to get in again, and they rejected me again. And I wound up going to Miami of Ohio and had the absolute best time of my life. And that's what put me in Chicago, which is what put me on a path to meet my wife, which is, it's just set the whole direction for my life after that.
There you have a great metaphor for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get back to one of the first things you said. I promised we'd come back here, which is that business is a spiritual endeavor. Can you talk a little bit more? You've talked about it a little bit here, but why do you say that business is a spiritual endeavor?
Because, O'Brien, you're creating value. And if creation is not spiritual, what is the most divine thing that a human being can do is to create. Whether you're creating another human being when you have a child, you create an idea when you conceive of something, you create a work of art, or you build a business. When you're creating, you're partnering God in his most divine activity, which is creation. And so when you're creating value, and you are always creating value, I often give the example of if you start off a business, an investor puts money in the business and he wants more money back from the business than he put in. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put the money in. If a creditor lends money to the business, he wants more money back than the loan he gave you. And so if you look at all the stakeholders, everybody wants more from the business than they put into the business. And businesses deliver that. The fact is the investor does get more than he invested, and the creditor does get more than he loaned. And so with each of the stakeholders of an organization, where does that more come from? That's the creation of value. To be able to create value, to be able to build value is something that is so spiritual and so divine. So if we understand that, there's an understanding that this is more than just doing things. This is more than tactics. This is actually innovating, creating, and building something that didn't exist before.
What does Judaism say about business?
A lot of things, and I think the one is that the world is wired in such a way to reward effort and to reward investment. Now, that doesn't mean that every investment turns out right. Clearly, it doesn't. If every investment turned out right, there would be no risk. And if there was no risk, there would be no reward either. So the management of risk and reward is part of life and part of religion. Often in the Bible, we see if you do these good things, you will be rewarded. And if you do these bad things, there will be negative consequences. So this idea of there being value is created when you do the right things. That's one of the important elements, I think, of business from a Jewish perspective. Do the right things, invest, build, take a risk on people, not just on money, and invest in people, invest in opportunities. Look to the future, see the world as having a better tomorrow than today. Being optimistic, those are all elements. The belief that there is a future. I always feel badly about people who don't have any faith at all. And I'm not talking about institutional religion. That's not important to me whether people are members of an institutionalized religion or not. But if one doesn't have any faith at all, what is the source of optimism? How do you know that there is a tomorrow? Never mind that there'll be a reasonable tomorrow. Well, from a perspective of random statistics, we should be blowing ourselves up. There might not be a tomorrow. So that idea of faith in the future, optimism in the future, investing in the future, taking a risk, taking a chance in the belief that those risks can pay off if they're wisely taken, that's all part of Jewish teaching and business.
I love that. Again, this is going to be maybe expose a little bit my naivete, and maybe you can tell me if this is a stereotype, but there appears in Jewish culture, maybe not necessarily the religion specifically, but in Jewish culture, a big sense of community, and in particular of business community. What are those teachings, and how does the culture or the religion or both talk about building healthy community through business?
I think it's the other way around. I think it's building healthy business through community.
Okay.
As being more important. So yes, you're right. In Judaism, community plays a really important part. And where you see it playing out in the relationship between community and business, an observant Jew will go to synagogue once or twice a day, which means I could go to a city that I've never been in before, anywhere in the world, and I'll look up immediately where the closest synagogue is, and I'll check up their times of prayer, and I'll go there the next day and I'll join them for prayers. Inevitably, somebody will come up to me and say, welcome, who are you, where are you from, what are you doing here, what business are you in? And inevitably, there'll be a connection. Perhaps you'll come to me for the Sabbath. Are you going to be in our town for Sabbath? Where are you planning to be? Come and join our family. And you're immediately integrated into a network that is a global network. It's not even just a localized network. So the value of network and the value of community, both local and global, is something very entrenched in Jewish life. And take that together with the fact that until recently, Jews were not allowed to do anything except business. Jews were not allowed to go to universities. All the Jewish medical schools in the United States are there because Jews weren't allowed to go to medical school in the United States in the 1920s and 30s. So they made all these medical schools. The Mount Sinai Hospital in New York and the Cedar Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles and all those in between. They were institutions built by Jews because they weren't allowed to do anything else. And so business was also because they weren't allowed to do anything else. So they went into business and they used their contacts and connections as ways of trading and of doing business. So I think that sense of community propelled and does still propel Jewish business worldwide. And of course, it does work both ways. You're right as well, that the fact that there's business community obviously supports the religious community. But I think the main thing is community is a value in Judaism. Being a constructive part, a contributive part of a community, a Jew will always ask himself or be asked, what are you doing for the community? What contribution have you made? Not just for the Jewish community. That's why you'll go to almost any meaningful city in the United States and you'll find universities, art galleries, institutions bequeathed or donated to by Jewish families. You don't live in a community without contributing. A Jew doesn't do that. It's not about taking from the community. It's not about finding where you get the most rights and emigrating to the country where you're able to get the most rights as an immigrant. It's so the opposite. It's where could I make the biggest difference as an immigrant? Where could I make a contribution? So I think making a contribution to community is a foundational value of the Jewish people.
Yeah. I remember I was listening to the Tim Ferriss show, a podcast, and I think he's passed away now, but it was Lord Rabbi Sachs, who I think was the head rabbi in all of the UK for a period of time, if I'm correct. Yeah. And he was talking about how over time, the world has gone in and out of being more individualistic and more communal and more individualistic and more communal, and how we've been on this ride towards individualism, at least in the West, over the last, I don't know how many decades. And I think coming out of the pandemic, I listened to it at the beginning of the pandemic, and coming out of it, I think about it a lot in the power of community. One, to build a business. Sure, that's what we're talking about here. But also just for human happiness. There are studies that have come out over the last decade that show that people live longer if they have more solid friendships. And that's another element of community. And so I think one of the things that we are missing in this fast AI-driven world is that sense of community. And I want to find ways for myself and my family, and just for as many people as I can influence, to have community amidst modern society.
It's so important. We're going to be facing that more and more because the people are trying to substitute real community with virtual community. And I'm a member of this Facebook group and I'm a member of this whatever. It doesn't work. There's no transference of energy. We talked before about human energy. Human energy is transferred when people are connecting, when people are real. And the need to become more local. And you see it happen in many parts of the country and the world where you're getting these local coffee shops. You're even getting bookshops coming back into vogue where people go in and speak. I had to go and buy a hat because as registered people, we wear hats on formal occasions, and not that easy to find a hat shop for a man nowadays. But in Los Angeles, I found a great place. And the woman who served me there was so passionate about her craft, about hats. She knew everything about them. And it was such a stimulating experience. And I thought to myself, had I gone online and chosen something and clicked, I wouldn't have had that experience. How much of the experience of life and community are we depriving ourselves of because we've substituted community with online?
Yeah, and it's something I think we have to actively work against because it's so easy to buy the thing on Amazon. And even to go to a different website is harder, let alone to take the time to drive to the store, to do the thing. We're all busy, and I struggle with it as much as anybody does, but it's just something I'm trying to fight against. I fail as much as I succeed, but I just think it is becoming increasingly important to re-anchor to community. So I think that's it's a great lesson to think about. And yeah, it'll help you in a bunch of different ways, spiritually, financially, emotionally, all of that.
Totally.
So maybe this is a little bit of an offshoot of that, but when we were prepping for this, you said we're all in service and we get to choose what we're in service of or who we're in service to. A little bit of a parallel to what we've been talking about, but can you explain that statement? We're all in service and we get to choose who or what we are serving.
So there was a great study that was done, I forget the research company that did it, but it was commissioned by American Express. And what they did was to measure the things that give people the greatest sense of happiness. So by attaching electrodes to the brain, they were able to measure degrees of happiness when they exposed people to various different experiences. And one of the ones that scored very high was receiving good service. That the highest of everything, they went through every kind of human pleasure. The highest of everything was giving great service, which was a stunning outcome. And I'm surprised it hasn't made greater headlines in the research world of behavioral sciences, that the greatest happiness comes to people when they provide great service. And particularly when they get some form of recognition for that service, whether it's a smile or a thank you or whatever. It's so inspiring. It's so nourishing. It's so uplifting. We crave that opportunity to be of service. And if you ask a little kid, what do you want to be when you're big? And I'm a little bit out of touch since I've asked kids those questions, but certainly it used to be, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a bus driver, or I want to be something. But what the kid is really saying, I want to do things for people. I want to be a hero. I want to save people. I want to help people. I want to be a doctor. Those are the things that little kids want to do. And then we beat it out of them when we tell them you can't make enough money that way. In other words, what you should be looking is how much you can get from the world, not what you want to give to the world. So we're born wanting to give to the world. And our system of education and upbringing kind of beats that out of us. Life's not about what you give. It's about what you take. That's not true. And everything we've talked about in this conversation bears it out, that life is about what you give. What you get is an outcome. If you're investing, you get reward. If you're not investing, then the only way you can get reward is by stealing, which comes back to the original statement of theft being a good business. The way to gain fulfillment out of earning a living is to earn your living from doing something, from adding value, from making a contribution. Then you're taking care both of your spiritual being, of your soul, as well as of your body, because you're earning physically, you're earning materially, you're earning the money, but you're doing so from doing something human. You're doing something that is connecting, making a contribution, and so on. So that idea of service is, we're wired to serve, and we do serve. And as I mentioned to you at the time, we can choose. We can serve our families, we can serve our nation. Just depends on the scale of service we want to be in. We can serve our customers, we can serve our bosses, or we can serve ourselves, be self-serving. But at the end of the day, we are serving. And the key is, of course, to be wise in choosing what and who we wish to serve.
And how do we go about making those choices? Because I'll admit, be a little vulnerable here. Sometimes when I think about the grandest of service, I'm just like, it doesn't light me up that way. Yeah, sure, I'd love to be recognized as being some great person who served and all of that, but that's just like ego. When I think about actually being of service, like I like sitting down with somebody one-on-one and helping them improve in some way. The thought of being a politician of service or a general in the army of service, that just doesn't really resonate with me. So how do we figure out the way in which is most authentic for us to be of service and start to navigate towards that?
It's so interesting because only last night, my wife and I were watching a chef's table, and the guy was a pasta chef. And he shows, and it's brilliantly done, and how he was given all sorts of opportunity to become this big chef. And he goes and he travels all over the world and he does all these things. And he comes to the conclusion at the end of the day, he says, I was put on this world to make pasta, to take flour and water and eggs and make something that nobody else has ever tasted or experienced. That's what I'm here to do. And it struck me that purpose doesn't have to be grand. If your purpose was to raise one human being whose name was Einstein, that wouldn't be a bad thing in terms of the impact you have on the world. And so if you're making pasta and you're connecting with people in your restaurant and you're giving people pleasure and you're having conversations with people and making them feel good, who knows how that translates into the way these people behave when they leave your restaurant and they go and do all sorts of things. So absolutely, service is not about bigness. Service is about the right thing, about doing what I'm designed and built to do. A tractor is designed to do certain things. A hospital is designed to do different things. Which is more important? It's irrelevant. All we know is if a tractor tried to cure people, it wouldn't do it really well. And if a hospital tried to plow the fields, it wouldn't do really well. The important thing is to use your capacities, use your gifts, your talents, your life experience to help you decide what it is that you're here to do. And in the work that we do, helping people design what we call, and we've talked about it, your leadership fingerprint, which is a mapping of who you are at your core. And we've developed a way to do this now with AI online, whereas it used to take 5 or 6 coaching lessons. It now takes 45 minutes of online coaching with AI to be able to get a pretty good outcome of a mapping of who you are at your core, at your very essence. What are the values that drive you? And we call it a fingerprint because everyone is different. We've done thousands and thousands of fingerprints around the world, and we haven't found 2 that are the same. Each one has a different leadership or spiritual fingerprint, as I call it, in Lead by Greatness, because that's who I am at my essence. That together with my purpose, and we've also developed a very efficient way of discovering what am I put on this world to do. It doesn't matter what faith I'm from or whether I am a person of faith or not, as long as I don't believe in randomness. If I believe that everything is random and just by chance, then I don't think our system will work that well. But if I believe that there's some kind of guiding force in the world and that I've been put here for some reason and that the people I meet are for some reason, then understanding my purpose, being able to discover and articulate my purpose, to be able to map my values, becomes essential in having before me a diagram and map, a radar of who I am and where I need to be going. And now I can simply test my service opportunities against that. Is this opportunity to serve something that is aligned with who I am? Is it aligned with my identity? And identity is really an important part of our work now, both in businesses and as individuals. Who am I? Not what am I? Not why am I? Not how am I? Start with the real core question of who am I? Who are we as an organization? Who are we as a nation? Because from that I can work out what should I be doing? Where should I be going?
So a trigger word for me is purpose a little bit. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I've struggled because I've worked with a lot of coaches and I'm a journaler and can be more introspective. And I've just really struggled over the course of my life with people saying, find your purpose. Anytime I think about, oh, my purpose is this, what about all this other stuff? And anytime I'm like, my purpose is this, I'm like, what about all the other stuff over here? And for me, I just find the concept of finding one singular purpose to make pasta to be too limiting. And there's a lot that I want to experience. Now, on the other hand, I like what you're saying about what are your values and who are you, and allow that to drive you. So how do you react to that, to somebody who maybe feels the way that I feel, where purpose is like, it just feels too big?
So you're right. And I'll come to explain exactly where you're right and where the limitation of. Think of purpose more as cutting out the distractions of your life. An example I often give is I was in my early 20s when my doctor told me that I have flat feet that will never be anything but flat feet. So I said, okay, what are the consequences? What does that mean for my life? He said, it means that you'll never join the Royal School of Ballet. And I went into a week's depression. Like, it was the first time I'd ever been told that there's something I could not do no matter what. That no matter how long I practiced, how dedicated I was, this is something I couldn't do. And then I got to the point where I thought, that's actually quite a relief. That means that's one thing I don't have to focus on. My role in this world is not ballet. At least I know that. And it's not marathon running. It scratches a whole lot of things off the list. So purpose helps you focus. It doesn't exclude other things. When you're focused on something, you still see a whole lot of other things. When you're focused, you're not blind to everything else. It's just that you're focused on one area. And that's what purpose does. It focuses your energies so that you can rank your effort. A lot of effort in the main focus, a little less effort in the second level, and less effort in the periphery as you go through. But you're still going to be involved in all of those things, except in things which are completely off your screen, because you're just not built for that. You're just not designed for that. And I think where one has to be careful with purpose, it's not an airy-fairy thing of find your purpose. And I get very frustrated with the coaches and consultants who, let's think of your purpose. And what do you think your purpose is? Well, there's a scientific way to do it. There's an analytic way to do that. There's a step-by-step process of getting to your purpose. And again, we've taken thousands of people through that. And people's fear often when they start working is, what happens if I can't find one? What happens if...
Yeah.
You will find one. We will make sure. We will help you because the process has proved itself so robust. And yes, this is part of our motto in our business, timeless wisdom, timely strategies. And this is part of that timeless wisdom that I do get from ancient Jewish sources. but my team of coaches and consultants, and most of them are not Jewish. So it's got nothing to do with the religious aspect. It's simply a belief that I've been put here to do something and a methodology that enables me to discover and articulate what that is.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of Jewish wisdom if you're not Jewish. Just there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of Stoic wisdom if you're not an ancient Roman or anything else.
Of course. Or Buddhist wisdom, absolutely.
I probably at like 6 times during our conversation jotted down the things that you were saying, because you have a way of distilling a truth or like a wisdom into a sentence. And I found that listening to other rabbis, I have sort of a similar feel. And I wonder, like, what are you all doing to be able to do that? And I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but I'm also serious too, because I think there is a skill or an art to wisdom and to curating wisdom and being able to apply wisdom. And so I'm curious what that development looks like, or what it has looked like for you to be able to do that, if you've even thought about it at all.
I'm so interested in that experience of yours. And if I were to attribute it to anything, I would think it would say that we are exposed and spend an enormous amount of time studying incredibly complex and somewhat abstract ideas and having to teach those ideas in ways that change people's lives. So that process of engaging deeply in the material. So when I study, I don't think of how am I going to explain this? How am I going to teach it? I'm just studying. So for example, Brian, I give a 20-minute podcast every day. Not really a podcast because I'm speaking. It's not an interview. I teach. It's 20 minutes. That takes me 5 hours to prepare. So,
wow.
So that gives you a sense of 4 of those hours is just studying, just going deeply into the material, not worrying about how I'm going to present it. When I've then got it, the next hour or 2 is about, so how do I take that and clarify it, articulate it, simplify it in a way that has take-home value, in a way that somebody can take home and actually apply. So I think just doing that over and over and over again, if I were to attribute that skill to any practice, that would be the practice that's most responsible for it.
And you know what's funny is that is the exact way that every person who's come on this show has described how to build whatever skill they help people build. It is just reps in the gym. It is doing the work, thinking about the work, distilling the work, teaching the work, and just doing that over and over and over again. So I shouldn't have been surprised. I should have known that answer beforehand. Yeah. What about somebody that maybe isn't afraid that they're not going to find a purpose, but is afraid that they're going to find one and it's going to force them to take a 180 in their life and do something drastically different? Because there's a lot of fear to that as well. So how do you coach people through that fear?
So that does happen occasionally. And one such example was when we emigrated to the United States. My business partner and I from South Africa started the business in the United States. One of our first really big clients was one of the leading banks in the United States. And we did our first session. We had a long relationship with that bank. We did our first session, and one of their stars did the purpose exercise and came to the conclusion he was working at the wrong bank, that this just isn't aligned with his purpose and his values, and that he needed to find something else to do. Yeah. So I was terrified of 2 things. We were going to lose him as a client, as a friend, and we were going to lose the bank as a client. And the CEO of the bank said to me afterwards, that was the best thing. It helped him find the right place for him, and it helped us develop somebody who was never going to be right for us. So he okayed, as I said, a very long relationship where we carried on doing this purpose work. But that is an example where somebody actually discovered a purpose that set them off on a different scale, and been very happy with his career and done exceptionally well. And so is the bank. They both did exceptionally well. So there is sometimes that says, what happens if I discover my purpose and I find I'm in the wrong area? That's okay. So then we help you pivot. Everything you've spent your life on is going to be useful and important and amazing. We don't land up doing anything in our lives that isn't valuable for the purpose we're meant to serve. So it will all be useful, but you're being woken up at this stage and you should be very grateful that there's something better that lies ahead for you. So we help people through that, and we occasionally find that kind of nervousness.
Yeah. It's amazing how change is scary even when it's good change.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think what's more important to notice is that 99% of the cases, people are in the right places. To me, it's quite miraculous that usually people are doing the right kind of things. They're in the right kind of companies. They're in the right kind of careers, that people just get drawn to the things that are able to be used as platforms for their purpose.
That's interesting. So if they are drawn to that normally, do you see that those people are drawn to those things and they know it, or that they're drawn to them, but they're like need help making the connection? They feel maybe a little bit of angst. Should I be here? Should I not be here? And it's only when they go through the exercise and get that comfort that, oh no, now I have clarity that this is what I'm meant to be doing. And now they can maybe even move faster through that environment or succeed more in that environment.
So mostly it's the second approach. People need the help and say, wow, then the penny drops, so to say, and they say, wow, they have this epiphany of I'm exactly where I need to be and how do I use this to greater outcome. If people are physicians and they're working in a great hospital, or they're teachers, if people have a very mission-oriented career, then usually they understand the connection. But if people are just working in a business, they often don't realize how aligned their job is with who they're meant to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So you had said at the beginning that you believed better people could have better business or do business better. What does it mean to be a better person? Like, what type of work are you doing outside of just helping somebody find their purpose? How are we leveling up the quality of human being that we are if we're working with you?
I think that's a multifaceted question, but I think that what's important in the work that we're doing is really around the area of self-mastery. I'm a better person if I have some level of mastery over myself. Every one of us are great. We all have enormous qualities and talents and skills and background and abilities. To be able to channel those in the right direction and not to be triggered to do the kind of things we regret is where self-mastery is. To be able to respond from the best place of being. What is the inner place of my being when I respond, when I talk to you, when I react to being threatened by you or to feel threatened by you? How do I retain my own self-mastery, my own centeredness, not self-centeredness, but my centeredness in my values? How do I act according to the person that my values say I am, not that I just feel in that moment? How do I, as Viktor Frankl said, become the person I could be and the person I should be, not the person I am? To me, authenticity doesn't mean what is what you get. The animals are good at that. And who does that better than an animal? And we wouldn't say animals are authentic. They're just natural. There's a difference between being natural and being authentic. Animals are natural. Human beings are supernatural. We can do things against our nature. We can overcome our nature. We can master our nature. That's something animals can't do. And when we talk about greater human beings, it's about human beings who can be supernatural, human beings who can rise above their instincts to do that which is right rather than that which is expedient.
And when you see people do that, what does that have to do with business?
So two things. Again, if I go back into the faith area, then I've got to believe that in the bigger universal scheme of things, that gets rewarded. If we look on the more micro level, that attracts people. It makes people follow you. It makes people being willing to work with you and for you, to partner with you, to be your customer, your client, an investor. It just makes people want to be around you as opposed to wanting to be far from you. So bullies attract people through their power, but it's very short-lived. And the moment they lose that power, they lose those connections. But somebody who's truly great just builds up long-lasting connections of people who want to help them, who want to be there from them, who want to partner with them in every way. And that's the key to business success. At the end of the day, if we can attract customers and we can attract partners and we can attract investors, what more do we need?
And what kind of quantitative results have you seen come out of this work? It's great to say this. I believe in this. I hope, because that's how I try to live. And so I hope that it's going to work for me. But you've been doing this a long time. You've seen actual business results. Like, what are the quantitative outcomes of improving ourselves qualitatively?
Brian, we have found that every one of our clients has grown exponentially in excess of their industry norms. Now, can we take credit for that? No, of course not. There are lots of factors that cause their growth. Maybe we self-select. Maybe the people who use us are people who are growing and positive and expansive and creative. But it's an interesting statistic that over the 30 years of business we've been in, every single one of our clients has grown in excess of industry norms. We worked overseas in another country with a global real estate investment company that went from $2 billion working in one country to $11 billion working in 15 countries. Just in the short period of time they worked with us. We worked with a Native American hospitality group that started in poverty. They had nothing, a few shacks with playing bingo games. And they grew their revenue by 700% in the first 8 years that we worked with them, and we still work with them. So we're seeing unbelievable outcomes when people commit to a strategy that is, and I'm not saying that ethics can replace strategy. Obviously, the strategy has to be wise. And that's why we talk about our timely solutions. We've got to be able to solve businesses' problems. Now, we as a company don't solve businesses' finance problems or businesses' technology problems. We're not specialized in that area. But we happen to believe that most of the challenges that face a business are around the human issues. And we do excel in helping businesses overcome their human challenges and find solutions to that. And yes, we're just finding amazing quantitative results, both in individuals that we're helping and coaching, and their career development, and large organizations that we're consulting to.
Fantastic. This has been a ton of fun, and I think that is a good place to wrap up. Is there anything that we have not touched on specifically in this conversation that you would want to add before we break?
The fortunes of stuff, we need about 10 hours.
That's where people can buy your book, Lead by Greatness. Would encourage people to check out the website for Lapin International, which we'll put all those links in the show notes. Everybody can reach out to your team and connect with you that way as well. This has been wonderful and timely too, regrounding in the humanity of the work and the long-term nature of service. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this. I've already written down probably 3 or 4 people's names that I'm going to send this conversation to, because I personally needed it this week. So I appreciate you coming on and helping reground me. And I'm sure it will have the same effect for the listeners.
I really appreciate your creating the opportunity and us meeting. I'd also appreciate the people who listen to your podcast, and this one particularly, but all of them, because the fact that they listen to what you do tells me something about them that I admire already without even knowing them. So I hope they get value out of this. In addition to the book and the website, there's also the digital fingerprint. I mentioned to you about the leadership fingerprint. People through our website can, at a fraction of a cost, at really pennies, can do their fingerprint online. They can then reach out to us if they want to discuss it and get a little deeper into it. But even just doing it online would give them enormous insight into their identity, into who they are and who and what they should be serving.
All right. You heard it, people. Go get your fingerprint. I love the fact that you've done that thousands and thousands of times and no two have been the same. That's really interesting. I hope this has been encouraging to everybody out there. I remember I worked for a lot of bosses right out of school that did not click with my ethics or values, I will say. And I remember finally getting into where I work now and going with a mentor to a meeting and just feeling such a relief that you could be an upstanding citizen and rely on your values and still do well and make money and all of those great things. But it really was just do a good job, treat people well, provide a good service, and that will pay off. And so it's encouraging to me. I hope it's encouraging to you listening, and I hope you will all go out and engage with some of David's content out there and be better people, and as a result, have better businesses. Good luck, everybody. Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.